This is Navigating the Middle Market, a podcast by Pitcher Partners that tackles the make or break moments every successful business leader faces when taking your business to the next level. On the show, we'll talk to experts who'll share actionable insights to help you navigate the common pitfalls you'll experience when scaling up. I'm your host, Anna Hacker. Today we're chatting with Sudha Viswanathan. Sudha is a partner here at Pitcher Partners Melbourne. Sudha leads our digital and data solutions and is passionate about creating commercial value from analytics. He has extensive experience heading up data-driven, customer-focused outcomes, including at previous roles at both Energy Australia and ANZ, where he led and delivered enterprise-wide solutions. In this episode, Sudha will explain how you can tell if your legacy systems are stifling your business growth and how to find efficiencies. He'll also dive into how to stay compliant with changing regulations and how you can get deeper, more valuable insights from your data. Let's jump in. Hi Sudha, welcome to the show.
Hi Anna.
So let's get right into what I think is probably the most critical question to ask initially, which is what are the main things you see as challenges for businesses during a growth phase?
Yeah, the three key challenges that we're seeing for organisations as they're going through their growth phase of their maturity is that, one, they've outgrown or they're starting to outgrow the legacy systems that they had when they commenced operations. Secondly, they're drowning in the increased level of regulatory obligations and finding a better way to tackle those using data and technology. Third is in terms of the fact that they're collecting a lot of information, a lot of data, but they don't have a good way of bringing it together to make informed, timely decisions. Yeah, they're some of the key challenges that we're seeing.
And so given our listeners are really interested in that scaling up phase and that their business is growing and they're looking for what the future will look like, how is it and at what point do you actually realise you've outgrown your systems?
In terms of outgrowing systems, what we're seeing is that organisations are looking to be more productive and be more cost effective in terms of delivering to their growth agenda. And they're finding that their systems, their legacy systems, are not able to deliver those things efficiently and effectively. So there are indicators in terms of inability to grow and scale along with their growth. They've generally invested a lot in their business during that time, but they haven't invested commensurately in their systems during that time.
What sorts of things are usually uncovered?
Well, first and foremost, the most important thing is to have clarity in relation to what your processes are and also what your requirements are. And that's requirements not only from what you need of the business today, but what you are likely to need in the near future. And having clarity of those requirements and also a good understanding of your business processes and how they might need to change is a really important component that you go through first before you embark on that journey of investing in a new system.
And it's probably very difficult because you don't have a crystal ball. You don't know what the future is going to hold.
Yeah, absolutely. So you have to try and predict a little bit of what your future needs are going to be and how the business is going to evolve and change. But you also need to make investments in systems that are scalable and that are able to be adjusted as you grow and as you change.
And given the role that you have, I'm sure that then you can predict a little bit more than someone who's coming in fresh and hasn't had to do this before.
Yeah, we're able to sometimes ask questions that bring that out with our stakeholders, and sometimes they're not quite thinking about it at the time, but we prompt them with a few questions and say, look, what about if this changes? What about you're needing to perhaps look at things on a lot more of a real-time basis? Are you likely to need that? Do you think that there might be a time in the future that might be useful for you? And that usually brings out some, oh yeah, that would be good. We might actually put that into our requirements kind of conversation.
And so having the right circle of support around a business is critical.
Absolutely. And you've got businesses who think that they've got enough of a knowledge in this space and sometimes go down the path of not getting that help or getting that support. And we often see that being a path which they sort of trip over a fair bit.
And so having it right from the start and the right process is the most important thing, most probably.
Absolutely. And it'll just avoid unnecessary time and spend if you get it right from the onset.
And so we're talking about getting it right, but do you have an example of when people have not maybe gone down the right path and had some not so great consequences? Do you have an example there where it hasn't been the best?
Yeah, unfortunately, there are a few examples, Anna. Maybe I might talk to one in specific. There was a client that approached us in the transport and logistics industry, and they were embarking on a change of their payroll and HR system, and they approached us in terms of getting some guidance in terms of how to go about that. We outlined the approach that we would take and the way in which that we would assist them through that process. At that point, they decided that from a cost perspective, to manage the overall cost of the project, that they would bring that work back in-house. So go through the system selection and implementation process themselves. What we have now found, a couple of years down the track, is that they went down the path of selecting a system which is rarely used and that currently is not paying their people correctly because of the fact that it hasn't been configured correctly to handle all of the complex rules. Now, what we're trying to do for them is to remediate. So basically they have to go backwards and remediate all of the incorrect payments that have occurred over that period of time. And we have to go through the selection process again in terms of they have to unwind and go through the whole thing again and basically do it twice.
Do it twice, but given a few years have lapsed as well, no doubt the business is more complex. There's more need for the right solution and they no doubt want to get it right this time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the costs and the requirements have changed and it's working through those again. And in some instances, the business processes have evolved as well and sort of making sure that that is appropriately catered for in the system that they're now selecting.
I think that anyone who has to look at any sort of digital solution knows how complicated it is, and it can seem quite straightforward because everything's pretty similar, isn't it?
Yeah, it's not only that everything is similar. I think it's also that you've got to be careful in terms of the sales pitch that you get from the vendors when they're selling those solutions to you. They will tell you a lot of things and they will at times omit some things. And it is making sure that you're asking a lot of thought through questions during that process and making sure that you've got through all of the gotchas really and making sure that the solution that you're going to be investing in and the cost that they've said that you're going to have to incur is going to meet your requirements. Because often it's not the initial costing or the configuration, it's all of the add-ons that you think are base requirements and that the vendor might think that they're sort of configurations, adjustments.
And understanding the speak of what that means. When someone who's a salesperson in particular is talking about this is what this solution offers and not understanding that maybe that isn't actually exactly what suits their requirements, that's where probably, given this is what you do day in, day out, you immediately can probably notice that's not actually what that means.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think it's both the language that's used, the terms that are included in the contract, and just being able to understand exactly what it is that you're getting. Most of the clients that we're working with, they're not experienced in this space and they don't have to be. They have to be in the field that they're delivering their business in. So that's where we come in normally to provide that expert support.
It's why you go to someone that knows what they're doing, I think. And that's why the business is needing to scale up and expand and have the right solutions in place. But then how can the businesses themselves use the data that they get to make informed decisions?
Yeah, in terms of the data challenge, the biggest thing here, Anna, is not a lack of information. It's not that the business isn't collecting the data. What we're often finding is that there's a significant amount of information and it's growing, obviously, in terms of all of the different channels that you're collecting data points through. But often organisations have stored these bits of information in various different systems and sources. And bringing that together to let the management see what's going on, enable them to have actionable insights in a timely manner so that they can make those appropriate decisions, is proving to be extremely complex. A lot of the businesses, especially in the small medium space, are still trying to use outdated methods in bringing that information together. We still see hundreds and hundreds of spreadsheets being used, Excel is kind of the go-to tool for a lot of businesses. And there are better ways of doing it now. And you do need to have a streamlined and efficient way of bringing all of that data together to be able to expose it near real time and make informed calls.
I must admit, throughout that entire last answer, I was smiling because I have absolutely worked in businesses that still work on spreadsheets. Having said that, we do work in an accounting practice, so we use spreadsheets quite a bit and our colleagues love Excel, but not for the sorts of things you're talking about. We need a system that actually can help provide efficiencies at your fingertips with answers and not need to rely on something like a spreadsheet.
Yeah, don't get me wrong, Anna. I love my Excel spreadsheets just as much as the other accountants here, but there are more appropriate solutions for certain challenges. And when the volume of data, when the different sources of information that you're trying to pull together starts to becoming a little bit more, you need to find a better way of bringing that data together and then exposing it in a way that the end user can interact with it and drill down to it and basically make their decisions in a lot more of an easier way than giving them a static spreadsheet.
And I think that shifting from a static spreadsheet to something that is interactive and something that literally you can ask any question because you can really interrogate the data is actually really exciting. Do you see clients that actually get very excited about a way that they can now use their data?
Yeah, absolutely. The end visualization that you present to them in the dashboard, whilst that's sometimes isn't the hardest part of the project, is where we get the wow from the client. And then they sit back and go, oh, this is amazing that I can get this information in a visual way, that I can drill down and have a look at it. And some clients are really impressed about the fact that they can take it anywhere as well, in terms of they can get it on their iPad or iPhone and use it when they're overseas. Those kind of things are real game changers for a lot of the owners and executives that we're working with.
And we just talked generally about that sort of wow factor, but have you had some more specific examples of where businesses have been able to use this and seen that difference in the way that their business can operate?
Yeah, there are a few examples. One we recently have gone through where it's more on a compliance-related matter. An organisation that has a number of truck drivers out on the roads, they've used us to help them get near real-time insights in terms of what the breaks are that the drivers are taking. And that's governed quite strictly by the heavy vehicle regulations. And so they need to ensure that they are adhering to that, not only for the safety of their workers, but also the safety of the general public. Because if they don't oblige by that and they've got a fatigued driver out on the road who has an accident and then causes some significant harm, then obviously that's a significant reputational impact for them as well. So we've exposed near real-time dashboarding in terms of that sort of breaks, how many breaks they're taking, how long they've been on the road, so they can effectively in near real time have those conversations, reach out to the driver going, you've been on the road for too long, pull over, have a break, those kind of conversations. And that's a compliance related sort of example, but we've also seen that we've been able to use this in a number of different ways in terms of margin analysis for retail clients and making sure that they are pricing things correctly or adjusting the way in which they're purchasing to make sure that they don't overstock when the sales trends are not strong. These are other examples that we're using. So it is largely up to the business in terms of what the problem is that they're trying to solve, and up to us to work out how best to give them something that they can use.
The problem-solving aspect must be quite exciting to work through and understand with the client. I could imagine that the first meeting is quite a conversation. It's not just here's a fact sheet and what do you want? It's a broader conversation than that.
Yeah, I think the biggest difference that we hear about in terms of the way we approach this is that we start with the business problem. We start with a conversation and to understand what are you going through and what are the challenges that you're facing or the opportunities that you're looking to tackle. And ultimately we guide them through that. And if we've got a solution or a recommendation, it is based on those problems or opportunities. We do not go into a meeting saying, we've built something, here it is. Can you find a way to perhaps apply this solution? And I think that makes a big difference to our clients, and we've heard that repeatedly. And that is the most exciting bit, because we're doing something that's actually going to make a difference for the business.
Well, and it sounds like often the broader public, when you're talking about safety and getting real-time data when it comes to safety of drivers and whether, there's something that they can put in place to actually protect all of the rest of us out on the road, that's for their benefit, but obviously it's for ours as well.
Yeah, a lot of things I think that people don't realise is that the advancements in technology is also resulting in an improved experience as an end, not only person in the public, but an end consumer of products and services. And so you're seeing that day in, day out in terms of the way in which you're interacting with businesses and the way in which they can make your experience with them a lot more seamless and streamlined.
And so we've talked about safety and we've talked about the way that, business can shift quite quickly based on real-time data. But I'm assuming that a lot of this is also around payroll systems and how that drives the business growth. How important are payroll systems and getting the right one in place important for scaling up businesses?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing with payroll systems is not only is it about helping a business grow and scale, but it's the consequences if you get it wrong. And unfortunately, we've seen way too many examples of organisations who have made small mistakes that have added up to some significant dollars in relation to remediation payments that they need to make to their people, but also the reputational impact that they have had as a result of being accused of what is now called wage theft. So payroll systems are, I think, critical in terms of getting it right when you're growing and when you're scaling. As the number of people grows and as the potential number of instruments that you're dealing with or the awards that you're dealing with changes, you need to ensure that the system is correct, you've got right processes, and that you've got it configured correctly to make sure you're paying your people correctly, basically.
And given it is a constantly changing beast, it's not static at all. I think it would be very hard to rely here on an Excel spreadsheet to make sure you're up to date. How is it that you stay on the right side of all those legislative changes?
It's a combined approach, Anna, in terms of we work very closely with legal advisors who stay close to the legislative changes and requirements that are coming, as well as providing the system support to ensure that you do select the right systems and you've configured it correctly and you've got the right processes in place to ensure that all of those things are working correctly to ultimately not only be compliant but stay compliant as things change.
So I'd just like to unpack the answer there, Sudha, in relation to how this process starts, because I think that what the listeners will be really interested in is what are the triggers, Sudha, then that businesses see that make them realise they do need to look at a new system, or maybe they've outgrown their existing system?
I think that varies, Anna, depending on the actual situation. So if I think about payroll, sometimes the trigger is that an employee has gone to the Fair Work Ombudsman and has queried their pay. They think that they're entitled to something that hasn't actually come through in their payslip. And that could mean that there's an issue there. And so that's often the trigger that we see as a starting point in relation to a payroll-related, either a system change that's needed and or a remediation program that's needed. On a more operational standpoint, we sometimes see that a business comes to us and say that they are unable to do something that they are wanting to do as their business grows. For example, a retail client approached us recently and they are looking to improve the customer experience. They want to have the ability for their customers to be online, browse through their catalogue, select a product, click, and then go into store and collect. Simple and offered by a lot of organisations now, but this specific client has got a system that isn't able to cater for that. They also want to invest in their loyalty program, have a loyalty program and be able to deliver more targeted campaigns to their loyal customers. Again, their current system is unable to cater for that. So sometimes it is an inability to do something that they're wanting, and sometimes it's an operational reason where they're finding that the system is grinding to a halt because they've now got too many people in their business wanting to use the system at the same time. These are often the different drivers or triggers that we see, that means that system change needs to be considered.
And no doubt, a lot of business owners put to the end of the list updating systems because they have so much else that is on that list before then. But clearly systems are critical because all of the things that you just talked about will stifle growth.
Yeah, unfortunately, we see often that it is left late and no action is taken until it's a burning platform.
Out of interest then, are there any triggers that are less obvious? We've talked about the ones that are maybe a bit more clear. You know, someone's gone to an ombudsman, there's a pressing issue. But are there some triggers that are maybe less obvious that people can look out for and potentially the listeners could think, that applies to me, I need to get on top of this now?
Yeah, I think the less obvious ones, Anna, we may have touched on that in terms of inability to be productive, inability to scale and grow and deliver the things that you're wanting to as a business. They may not be as apparent because it's not burning and it's not breaking, but it's you don't do something because you go, oh, that's going to be too hard because we're not going to be able to do that today. So you put certain initiatives, certain changes on the back burner because you don't think it's possible today. So those things often aren't as in your face because it's not breaking. Nothing that you're doing today is unable to be done, but your needs for the future or the needs to improve aren't able to be delivered. So they're a little bit more subtle, if you like.
And you probably don't know what you don't know. So you don't realise that there's an opportunity here that could be in place if you looked at it now.
Yeah, I don't think as many of our businesses that we work with are looking regularly at what their competitors are doing and what might be possible. They're focused a lot inwardly and looking at what they can do based on what their understanding is. And that's where sometimes an external perspective helps in terms of pointing out to them, well, your competitors are doing this. You should be able to deliver this. And have you considered whether or not this is something that your customers might want? That's often the challenge is making someone realise that there is a better way, there is a need for change.
And not relying on systems that are already in place that are working, but will they work for where they want to go next?
They might be working, but are they holding them back?
That's really good. So when we're talking about clients that have high volume and low margins, how is it that you can assist them to make small improvements that might provide a big impact?
Yeah, I think that's very much in relation to using the data more effectively and helping them make decisions much more faster and in a much more informed way. An example that I can think of, and a recent one, is that we're helping an organisation that's in the vehicle retail industry, and they have got high volumes but fairly low margins on one part of their business. And that part is struggling at the moment. And what they do currently is that they're collecting all of this information from a fairly old system that takes a bit of time to extract the required data and manipulate that data and then be able to have a look at what's actually happening in terms of sales, in terms of at a SKU level, what's happening from a margin perspective, and ultimately what they need to do in terms of purchasing decisions and pricing decisions. What we've helped them go through is to extract that data, put it into a central data warehouse and have insights being exposed to the relevant decision makers, including the buyers, including the pricing analysts, to be able to see that and make those small tweaks much more faster. And it's much more readily apparent in terms of where they are losing margin and where they've got opportunities. So the power of being able to do that with the data is just being able to be a lot more analytical and being able to expose that to the people who are making the decisions so that they don't spend so long in bringing it together. I think often what we find is that analysts, they're called analysts, but they spend 3/4 of their time wrangling and working with data. That's not really where they can add value, and that's not where they want to spend their time, but that's where they need to in order to get it to a point where they can then do the analysis and then make those recommendations. And unfortunately, there's a disproportionate amount of time that's spent on the first part.
And so the data's king. We need to have the data. We have the data. We need it in a way that we can actually use it.
Yeah, the data is king, but the data's already largely there. Yes, sometimes there might be some issues upstream where the collection or the quality the way in which the data is being captured can be improved. And sometimes the way in which we go through a project and the insights that we expose highlight some of those problems where maybe businesses need to change the care that they take when they're capturing the data. But often the data is there. It's how quickly and easily can it be brought together and exposed so that people can make the right calls.
So I'd like to just delve a little bit more into omni-channels. Can you talk us through what's happening in that space?
Yeah, what's happening in the omni-channel space is that organisations are able to deliver a seamless experience now across all of their different channels. Effectively, you're able to start a journey online, do your browsing, do your research, then click and basically go into your nearest store and pick up that product within hours of purchasing it. That's the norm now, and that's the expectation. Unfortunately, some organisations are not able to deliver that because of the systems that they've got and the limitations with their legacy systems that they have.
That is very helpful and a great place to end. So thank you so much for coming on the show, Sudha.
Thanks, Anna. Pleasure.
You've been listening to Navigating the Middle Market. This podcast is brought to you by Pitcher Partners Melbourne. To learn more about how Pitcher Partners can help you scale your business, head to our website, pitcher.com.au. To make sure you don't miss an episode of Navigating the Middle Market, be sure to subscribe to or follow the show in your podcast app. And while you're there, leave us a 5-star review. It really helps others to find the show. I'm Anna Hacker, and I'll see you in the next episode.